Great. Good morning, everyone in the room. Good morning, everyone online. For folks online, I do know you're alive. I will say, though, that if you're online, you missed camaraderie last night at our reception. And as I mentioned to Peter this morning, especially apropos of our topic, I forgot what it was like to enjoy the company of colleagues. Yeah. But then, perhaps not too often. So, this morning we have a great start to our day. I've been looking forward to it tremendously. I just want to, I think in the room here for most of you, these folks are no strangers, but we have all kinds of attendees from all parts, and so let me just briefly say who will be speaking to us today, and then we'll get on with it. Caroline Crawford is of a special relevance to us as recently editor of Confronting Academic Mobbing in Higher Education, a superb collection to which in the room Peter Wyatt contributed, among others. In her civilian life, Caroline is professor of instructional design and technology at the University of Houston Clear Lake in Houston, Texas. She earned her doctorate at University of Houston in Houston, Texas, with specialization in instructional technology and curriculum theory. Ken Westhuse, our other panelist today, is professor emeritus of the University of Waterloo, and well known in this community as author of the MBA of Excellence and editor of Workplace Mobbing in Academe, and perhaps most saliently, just for as demonstrated yesterday, I think encyclopedic knowledge, which always blows me away, of the literature in this vein. So it's a pleasure to have these two with us this morning. And if you're ready, Caroline, I'll turn it over to you.
Oh, yes, sir.
All right.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so sorry I missed last night, but what a wonderful day yesterday became. The conversations that we were having and the brilliance that clearly is in the room, virtually and face-to-face. I'd really like to speak today about supporting others while surviving as a target. I didn't realize that I was a target for a long time. I just thought it was the lovely work environment in which I was trying to survive, just trying to do my job and get along and move along. And it took a long time for my several colleagues were going through the same journey. And we came together, coalesced, and went, what the heck is going on? And we realized, oh, there's all this brilliant literature out there describing what we're going through. And it's starting to make sense. I'm not a victim, I'm a target. And that made all the difference in my world. And that's where I'd like to come into this conversation about supporting others while surviving as a target and thinking about the community supports that we bring to our environment. How do we help each other, not only ourselves, but each other? Don Quixote is someone that I was considering while thinking about a metaphoric representation. Okay, it's weak, but still thinking about Don Quixote as an intriguing character reflecting a story of jousting with hulking giants, yet were merely inconsequential windmills in reality. He was a low level of nobility with a desire to revive a sense of chivalry and to serve his nation. And I consider Don Quixote's story to parallel my own journey through a toxic organization in which academic mobbing was not merely supported, but reveled as a way to take pleasure in attacking hardworking colleagues within the university environment. And it seems like those are the people, especially in my environment, but also within the literature, who are the focus, the ones who are trying to do their job, so to speak, who have a passion around service and the research, teaching, service. As I experienced myself as a target of academic mobbing, I was fortunate to have a closely knit group of strong colleagues surround me and attempt to help me overcome the egregiously harmful attacks, and they were psychologically devastating in so many ways. At least my community supports understood that I was not at fault for the situation in which I found myself, in which the narrative was developing, and that I did not understand how to respond to deceitful untruths and inaccuracies that were slanderous and denigrating efforts to push me out of academia, which was the outcome that was clearly desired. We don't want to just hurt you. We don't want to just attack you. We want you gone, not just from this university, but as a general statement, you need to be gone. Slowly, I became more acclimated and accustomed to the mobbing efforts, which is a sad statement. I realized that so many other viable faculty colleagues and students were also dealing with similarly impactful and egregious academic mobbing experiences. Through my efforts to be of service to others, in the hopes that I could ameliorate at least a bit of the assaults and harassment, I attempted to revive my own sense of chivalry within the bounds of the higher education landscape and serve other faculty and students. And this is my journey, this is my narrative that I'd like to bring to the discussion. So I'm hoping that everything is progressing as I'm moving forward. Please tell me if it's not.
Looks good.
I found Deming's work around what the organizational system looks like to be of interest, looking at how it's constantly designing and researching different information, but primarily looking at the receipts and test of materials around production, assembly, inspection, and what that actually looks like for the consumers. And within a university structure, I'm thinking, okay, so we're kind of, I perceive myself as just a happy worker, trying to do my job, enjoying my research areas, trying to be of service to others, which to me also includes being a viable instructor. And that's where a lot of the issues began in the research that I was publishing, basically the numbers and my student evaluations. It seems that I became a threat to different people just because I enjoyed doing my job. So looking at production, assembly, and inspection, what that actually looks like and how different attacks occur was comfortable to me as an organizational structure of understanding. Who is supplying the materials and equipment? How do we use that information? And how does that impact our consumers? So I'm an old English teacher. Love English. And as I'm going through this, all I could think was, I feel like Alice in Wonderland. What is going on? There can't be that many crazies in the university environment. But it turns out there are.
Yes, there are.
There are a lot.
Yeah.
And one of the things I started thinking, I started reading around Alice in Wonderland and then looking at the criticisms, the analyses of Alice in Wonderland. And one of Lewis Carroll's comments that really pulled me in was, there's a place like no place on earth, a land full of wonder, mystery, and danger. Some say to survive it, you need to be as mad as a hatter. And that's where I felt like I was going in a lot of ways. I don't understand this environment. I don't want to be a part of this environment. The larger world of academia is so brilliant. Why am I in this place? And why does it feel so crazy? And then I started reading some other people's work, and Callan is an amazing colleague who started playing around with the ideas of Alice in Wonderland. So I just pulled out a couple of quotes from Callan's work, such as, if you happen to know Alice in Wonderland, there's this crazy Red Queen who's just power-hungry nuts, saying to a knave, it's far better to be feared than loved. It made me think of my provost, my deans. Her power is not only used to increase fear, it's absurd, it's nonsensical, and it's arbitrary. And again, that is so descriptive of the journey it felt like I was going through. I didn't know what the day was going to look like, crying as I'm driving to work, crying as I'm driving home. It was wild and woolly place to live. And reason really had no pull when cruelty ruled the land, leaving madness as a means of resistance. And so much of what I was reading around Alice in Wonderland, I can't help but wonder if Lewis Carroll came out of a similar world of what is the matter with you people? Why don't you just live your lives? So I wanted to bring forward a couple of quotes around that, especially that madness, the madness that we're living through as the targets of academic mobbing is very much nonsense, or perhaps it's a nonsense. It's a story of where Alice finds her way back home, back to herself, as if it's her becoming a self through being with the madness. And to me, that was such a powerful statement. It's like, oh my gosh, you're right. I'm living in an absolutely crazy, wackadoo world, and it's impacting me. What am I going to look like? How am I going to live in this environment? But then I'm looking at my colleagues and going, oh, they don't deserve this. They're just trying to make their way in life. So merely a couple of the different syndromes and situations that were brought forward that I was looking at. Tall poppy syndrome seemed to be very much centric to the world that I was finding myself trying to work in and trying to support other colleagues. Tall poppy syndrome, where if you're doing what they perceive to be more better than your colleagues, they're going to cut you off at the nut. Make sure that you're taken down, make sure that you are no longer standing out amongst the poppies. And then it turned into a very interesting, the males in that environment were crazy. But they were very much used to being in power and control position. And if the perception was that someone might have been doing quote unquote better than their career path, their perception only, then it was going to be uncomfortable and those people needed to be put in their places. And I started finding that to be a true statement. But so many females who were moving up, who were sycophants to many ways. Perhaps they weren't publishing very much. Perhaps they didn't have the best student evaluations, but they were in the service. And by in the service in the university, I mean, they were sucking up very well. I was very impressed by the things that were done that, interestingly enough, I was accused of. For it all, for my world, it all started very strangely with weird gossip from the older males, the people who had full professor positions and stuff. I was like 29, I think, when I started there, and the gossip started around who I was sleeping with, how I was sleeping with. And I apologize to everyone in the room, but as a 29-year-old walking into academia, it's like, ew, you don't think I can do better than that? Ew. So it was, but the women were, interestingly enough, that was the gossip that I was trying to deal with. But after a while, it became, I was just sleeping with everybody at this university. I was doing very well for myself in that strut. How I got any actual work done was beyond me, considering the amount of gossip that was going on. It's like, no, it's not true. No, of course. Why? Really? Why am I even talking about this with you? Ew. So, but then it became much like Denise McDonald is very much a very creative, metaphoric, qualitative writer. She likes to align metaphoric concepts with what's actually going on to help construct the storyline. And that's where the mafia came in, with the concept of who are these people, and look, we have these actors and there's such an alignment here. And that's kind of how I perceive the world that I am still living in, looking at the social elimination process. And this is just my perception, started out tall poppy syndrome, then it became more of a queen bee syndrome, where the women who were more sycophant started working up in the organization, and they wanted to make sure that they maintained the singular female administrator type position. And it became more of a mafia type approach to the world that I was living in and that everyone else was watching myself and my colleagues live in. But the problem that I perceived was we had some really strong hires, and those really strong hires started standing out as well, and they started being attacked. And it's maybe it's because I'm a middle child, but I have a real problem with the whole justice concept. Why are these people treating others differently? Let them do their job. So it became much more of a protective type environment for my colleagues and myself, where we felt like we needed to help our friends. And again, thinking about social elimination process in a different way, looking at Canterbury Tales and what are these deadly sins that are inherent within different organizations? How do people play? And it turns out in academia, people don't play nicely. So I started looking at the deadly sins and, gluttony, anger, greed, envy, pride. Oh, that's who these people are in so many different ways. But then there have to be different virtues. There have to be a balance in there. And thinking about temperance and patience and mercy, and looking at supporting our love of neighbor and humility and such things, it became more of a balancing act. How do colleagues who have been moving through this academic mobbing environment and being targets, how do we support each other as we see other people who are traveling the same journey? And then I started thinking about Dante's Inferno and the circles of hell. And there were so many that were touched upon as we move through this space. And I try to view things in more of a humorous level. It's like it's so hurtful. There has to be some kind of sarcastic response to it just to survive. And as I started looking at all these different things, again, old English teacher, Alice in Wonderland, oh, look at these great quotes. And the analysis of these situations were so apropos. And then looking at Canterbury Tales and the different aspects of that. And then Dante's Inferno and looking at these different circles like, oh my gosh, I've worked through this. This is very much where we are. And then trying to help our colleagues think about the world in that way. I mean, treachery, that's a interesting world to be in, even though you might start out in kind of a limbo and people are a little jealous of what you're doing. It quickly went into a fraud and treachery type of environment where no holds barred, we're going to take you down type situation. And again, I share all of this to get to two female colleagues with whom I worked, and I was thinking about them as more of a Venn diagram type situation where they had differentiations, but they were so similar in many different ways. From being female colleagues, very young, starting out tenure track, African American. They came from very prestigious universities that perhaps some of the colleagues who were attacking them did not. Um, they were primarily graduate faculty. They didn't work with the undergraduate students very often. They were very well published, partially because myself and my colleagues were helping them, learning along the way, but also because they were viable in the field and they could stand on their own. They didn't need help, which many of the people who became the attackers, not only the bullies, but the flying monkeys who helped come up with the lies and supports, were also playing into. And their professional knowledge, they were acknowledged out in the field, out within their specialization areas. They didn't need to be acknowledged within their university environments, which I found very intriguing. That, okay, I'm working here, this is where I'm getting my paycheck, these are the students that I want to impact, let me see if I can play with my colleagues nicely, but my real world is far beyond the walls of this specific university, this specific ivory tower. But again, they were so different. One of the faculty was working with older, it was an older person. The other faculty member was very much younger. She was in her late 20s when she started her tenure track years. Faculty one had very much whisper campaigns about how she wasn't viable, she wasn't any good. Oh, she's a horrible presenter, she's a horrible instructor. The whispering campaign was outrageously hurtful for this person because she was viable in the field before she ever came into this university. Yet faculty two was very much an in-your-face attack because she was, my perception, because she was younger, because she was still making her bones, making her way through her developing a reputation in the field. Faculty one was ignored for any type of prestigious service that she brought forward, literally ignored. They didn't even acknowledge all the amazing work that she was doing and the prestigious level of service that she was attaining out in the field. While faculty two, they downplayed it. Oh yeah, well, yeah, she's becoming the president of whatever. She is, sure, she just obtained this really impressive grant. Yeah, well, yeah, but everybody does that. It's like, no, this is a multi-million-dollar grant. I think this is a big deal type situation where, oh, well, yeah, but that's your job. It's very interesting, the differentiations of how these people were treated, even though there were so many similarities. And faculty one emphasized the procedural attack. She understood documentation. She had been around long enough to understand that you document everything and you become a documentation, because it's female, queen or king. And then faculty two, didn't understand why would I be treated this way? Why would I keep this documentation of how horribly I'm treated? And that's one of the things that, as people who are the targets learn quickly, you become strong at your documentation. Not only if you have to get a lawyer, but as documentation as you move up the food chain to the provost, to the president, even if you're in a system type situation where you can document, no, this actually didn't occur. Here's the date and times. Here are the communications. I didn't do anything that's being claimed. Now, they're claiming all this other crazy stuff. Show me the documentation that supports any of that, which was a lot of our type of supports for our faculty colleagues. It took a lot of time and effort to support recognizing the journey that my targeted colleagues and I went through, and how long it took us to realize what was going on. We were trying to help our faculty colleagues when we saw this beginning. We tried to help move them forward at a faster pace so maybe we could shut down the mobbing situation for them so that they might be targets, but they knew how to deal with it a little more strongly. And the conversations that we had outside of our regular workday, we would see each other at different events outside of the university. We'd be at different conferences together. We'd be working on different works together. And having those conversations were very powerful to try and support moving our colleagues forward as, you're okay. This isn't about you. None of this is about you. Hear us from a learned understanding. This has nothing to do with you other than you're doing your job and you're doing it well. And then I started thinking about, it's not just our faculty colleagues. Some of our stronger students are dealing with this as well. And there's one student that I specifically began supporting. It was a male, and he was a doctoral student. And I tried to stay, personal statement soapbox, I try to stay away from the doctoral programs at my university because of how the doctoral students are treated and the quality of program. My stance only, just saying. But this student stood out. He was a doctoral student, a veteran, retired veteran, military veteran, and he brought a lot to the table. He was brilliant in so many ways, and his personality was very, very strong. But he was targeted to the best possible ability of these faculty. And I never understood why. He started taking my classes, and other students started telling me of his experiences. And then he started sharing his experiences through the course environment. I never asked. And it was very interesting trying to support the student because of, and again, same with faculty, the ignorance of policies and procedural supports that were in place, and trying to guide our colleagues, because we'd become little queens of policy and procedure and looking at the handbook and looking at system mandates and such. We knew exactly where all this information was. And when the students started having problems, we started taking the student to the policies and procedures and talking about, oh, well, where's your candidate plan of study, your degree plan? It's like, I'm starting my dissertation and I don't have one. It's like, I'm sorry, what? That's your contract with the university. Why wouldn't you have that? Well, nobody's ever told us we needed one. Okay, here's the policy and procedure. You're being screwed over, and they can do whatever they want to you until you have that contract. Get that done.
Carolyn, 2 minutes.
2 minutes, thank you. And just thinking about, as a graduate student, what that looks like, and the hurdles that I was lucky I didn't go through this as a graduate student, but I've seen so many horrible things happening, and then university ignorance of the policies and procedures also by the administrators and the other faculty, and how to use that to your benefit. And the toxic organizational impacts, thinking about the recognition and reaching out. How do you go about that? What are your support systems? The documentation, how do you document? Putting together the puzzle of the documentation, telling your story, telling your narrative, so other people can actually make those connections and see what you're going through. But also, how do you, the supports that are in place, the legal aspects. I had actually a colleague from a different college call me up privately and go, okay, so you need a lawyer. My wife is a department chair. She was just in this meeting. It was all spilled what they were actively engaged in doing to you. She came home, told me, you need a lawyer. It's like, lawyer? What the heck? So all of those kind of situations, and looking at long term, this isn't just about your university. What are your long term and larger academic experiences, and how do you go about moving through that space? Thank you so much for giving me the time and rambling. But I appreciate everything, and I'm curious what kind of questions are coming forward. I saw that there's something in the Q&A. Oh, anonymous, thank you. Love this. At my last job, where I was told by a priest I couldn't be the principal because I was a woman. I had that experience too, especially people on, if you're the PI of a grant proposal, changing out your name without ever knowing that it was changed out. And it served as the assistant for 11 years. Oh, wow. I said, have you familiar with Dante's Inferno? Yes. Dante's Inferno, yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for listening and
Thank you.
engaging. Absolutely outstanding, brilliant colleagues. Thank you.
Transition accounts mentioned, by the way, Caroline has multiple works in progress. She was gracious to allow us, we could have had her do an entire panel by herself with multiple presentations. And it's really exciting for me that these are all in the pipeline and they'll be, coming to support our efforts. Thank you,
So
Caroline.
kind. Thank you.
Yeah.